Joining us, former Arkansas governor and former presidential candidate Mike Huckabee joins us now. Governor, good to have you this morning. What is your latest take on what we're learning about the killer here, his behavior, his motives leading up to this, and the political response that we're seeing in the wake of this horrific attack?
Well, the one thing, Sandra, that becomes very clear is that there is a very different approach to dealing with this that you hear from Donald Trump or that you hear from Hillary Clinton or President Obama. In one case, Donald Trump is willing to offend Muslims in order to protect Americans. It appears that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are not willing to offend Muslims at the expense of protecting Americans. And I know that sounds harsh, but look, when we have people who are claiming to engage in mass murder in the name of religion, and they do it celebrating their connection to ISIS and celebrating their connection to radical Islam, either we're going to be honest and say it's a problem, or we're going to continue to see a lot of Americans, innocent Americans, murdered in cold blood. And it's just, I think, time for it to stop.
Governor, and a lot of what you're referring to, as I understand it, is the lack of the left to label this radical Islamic terrorism. Donald Trump clearly doing that in his speech yesterday, but Hillary Clinton did change her tune just a little bit. But we do have both the front runners of both parties going after each other over this war on terror. Here's some sound from that, and I want to get your response on the other side.
Inflammatory anti-Muslim rhetoric and threatening to ban the families and friends of Muslim Americans, as well as millions of Muslim business people and tourists from entering our country, hurts the vast majority of Muslims who love freedom and hate terror.
She has no clue, in my opinion, what radical Islam is, and she won't speak honestly about it if she does, in fact, know. She's in total denial, and her continuing reluctance to ever name the enemy broadcasts weakness across the entire world. True weakness.
But as we know, Governor, Hillary Clinton saying yesterday that she's not afraid to say radical Islam. Is she changing her tune a bit?
Well, she's certainly changing it, because in an interview with George Stephanopoulos several months ago, she explicitly refused to say that there was a connection to Islam. And I think that that shows that there is this reluctance. I'm in Tel Aviv right now, where 4 people were murdered in a cafe just a week ago. There are two things that are very different in how the Israelis approach these kind of incidences and the way Americans do. Number one, they don't mind calling out who did it. They're very careful not to in any way elevate the identities of these people to make them heroes or to make them look like they're some kind of celebrities. They're very careful simply to talk about what they were, not necessarily who they were, and show their faces. But the second thing, Israelis immediately go right back to business as if to put their middle finger in the air at these terrorists and say, you are not going to stop us. There were people in that restaurant hours after those murders had taken place there. I think we do the right thing in America when we do have our time to grieve, but we need to say to the terrorists, we're coming after you, we're going to annihilate you, and you're not going to be able to stop us from living our lives in freedom.
Governor Leah Gabriel's here.
Governor Huckabee, you make a very good point that, terrorists want to terrorize. They want to stop us from living our normal lives. FBI Director Comey made that very point when he spoke yesterday. You also make a point about how the difference really between Clinton and Trump is in how they feel essentially about offending Muslims. But, we've heard so much about, whether or not it's necessary to identify this as radical Islamic extremism. FBI Director Comey, who I personally have a lot of respect for and think has done a very wonderful job in his term, continues to do a good job, very respectable man. He doesn't really do that. And I just wonder, is the real issue giving intelligence operators, giving intelligence analysts, giving law enforcement professionals the ability to do their job better? And what would you say needs to be done, when you look at the issues of privacy versus security in our country? Can't we do a better job of giving those intelligence professionals, those law enforcement professionals, the ability to find out who we really need to consider a threat?
Well, Leah, one of the disturbing things about this particular case was that this guy had cleared every background check, working for a security company that does business with every level of government agency, including the CIA. The FBI had a file on him. They interviewed him twice, and then they decided that he wasn't a threat, and so they threw his file away, which meant that when he went to buy those weapons, nothing tripped up to say maybe this guy ought to be looked at again. So I agree with you. I think James Comey is a very honorable man, but he's dealing with being hamstrung by an administration that is so careful by purging the FBI manuals of any message at all that might be offensive to Islam. I go back to this. Look, not all Muslims are terrorists, but every time we have an act of terror in America, it's almost inevitably somebody stands up and says Allah Akbar and says it's in the name of ISIS or Al-Qaeda. They don't stand up and say Jesus saves. So when they start doing that, we'll say religion doesn't matter. But it does matter in this case because we have a common denominator, and that is that people are doing this in order to advance radical Islam and to destroy civilization as we know it. Civilization, whether it's Christian or whoever.
Dominic Tavella's here.
Governor, good to see you again. Dominic Tavella. How come the conversation is focusing on whether it's a Muslim or an immigration? It's not the last 8 years of this administration and their foreign policy. I don't think we've had worse relationships with Israel that I can remember, Saudi Arabia that I can remember, the weak response in Libya. I mean, it's this administration's weak foreign policy that really has brought us to this point. Why isn't that the focus of why this is going on?
Well, I think the immediate focus is the impact that bad relationship has for Americans. But you're right. I've asked many of my liberal and hardcore Democratic friends and Obama supporters, and believe it or not, I actually have some, and here's what I've asked them. Name one country on this planet with whom we have a better relationship now than we did 8 years ago. And not one of his staunchest supporters can name a country. Some of them say, and they're not joking, they say, well, Iran. And I'm thinking, yeah, we've been played the chumps for Iran, but every other country on this earth we don't have a better relationship with. They don't respect us more. They don't fear us more. We look weaker in their eyes, and I believe that makes America more vulnerable, not more safe.
All right, good stuff. Governor Mike Huckabee, thanks for joining us this morning. Good to have you. And safe travels back home.
Thank you.